Bama loves to just point out that they own whoever. They own Georgia, and then they don't have that anymore. They own Tennessee, don't have that anymore either. So, tough times for them.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome into Monkey Knife Fights College Football Preview Show. I'm Dan Watkins. Joining me, as always, the great John McKechnie of Rotowire.com. John, it's rare that things actually live up to the hype nowadays, but last week, going in, we were talking about it being possibly the greatest college football Saturday in over 2 decades, and man, oh man, did it deliver. How's your heart rate? Has it come down yet, or are you still riding the high?
I'm still absolutely going, and it doesn't help the old ticker that this weekend is going to be insane as well. But last weekend, the Michigan-Penn State game, maybe it wasn't as close as we would have hoped, but I mean, it was still like a fun couple of hours there to get us ready. And then, I mean, just the sheer raucous environment in Knoxville. Obviously, they are a natural enemy of mine, but so is Alabama. But either way, like, you got to give it up to the Tennessee people. Like, they absolutely brought it. So loud at Neyland Stadium, just such an electric atmosphere. Like that. I was like the kind of like you watch the college football game day, and it was like it's always good, but that one was at another level, and you could feel it. Like, it was really palpable, and for Tennessee to pull it off was just unreal. So that was insane. The Pac-12 cannibalizing itself. Unfortunate but predictable. That time is a flat circle. It happens every year, it seems like. But that USC Utah game was a lot of fun as well. Even Arkansas BYU was kind of nuts. I mean, there were so many good games last weekend. It's like it's hard to even like kind of recap it, make sense of it
Yeah,
all.
I'm glad you brought up game day because I'm not even a Tennessee fan, and I was fired up after game day.
Right.
And listen, Peyton Manning is one of like my least favorite athletes of all time. I'm a guy through and through, New England Patriots fan, but like having Peyton there, like directing and like doing, organizing Rocky Top and all that. I was listening on the radio on ESPNU radio, and I'm in my car like, oh yeah, like this is freaking awesome. And everything about last Saturday was incredible. But my like sneaky favorite moment was when I flipped over to the SEC network for SEC Nation, and our guy Paul Feinbaum coming out in the casket to the Undertaker music and then popping out in a Tennessee jersey to declare a Vols victory was just absolutely nuts. I don't know if you've seen this yet. Did you see it?
Oh yeah.
It was just awesome. And then reading like the backstory behind that's actually some like 58-year-old guy's real casket that he bought for himself. It's just like, and like that once like one of the producers like heard about this, they called him and like they're like, can we use this as like a prop for SEC Nation? He's like, oh yeah, absolutely. And it was just incredible. Everything about the day was just awesome, and it was nonstop from like 10 a.m. with the start of the pregame shows all the way until midnight.
Yeah, that's it's a cliche, but like there's nothing like college football, and that is case in point. A loaned casket for this bald curmudgeon to pop out of like the Undertaker to declare that one team is going to beat the other. Like what other sport could that possibly happen in? Unreal.
None. Only in college football. I do want to hit on one more point though from that Tennessee Bama game. Did you see after they took down the goalpost that the university started a GoFundMe to get those replaced? I was fully prepared to come on this show and rip the University of Tennessee today, but it turns out that the fans paid it. So I can't fault them because like they got the money from the fans. The only thing I can say that I'm shocked about, I didn't know that a set of goalposts cost 150 grand. I figured those things would be like, like maybe 5-10 tops.
That's highway robbery, and boy, were there some message board fodder from our fine friends in the state of Alabama and Tide Nation about those goalposts and how that was actually a pre-planned operation by the University of Tennessee to rid some not up to code goalposts. And put them in the river to bury the evidence that those goalposts that Alabama was playing on, not fair. So that's how down bad Alabama people are after they lose, where they literally come up with, it couldn't have been just 100,000 people being insanely excited about the catharsis of beating Alabama for the first time in 15 years. No, it couldn't. No, this was Tennessee cheating, and they are hiding the evidence in plain sight.
Yeah. God forbid, we actually covered Jalen Hyatt, on like one deep throw. I mean, just one.
No, they didn't even have Cedric Tillman. It's Bama, the class. I mean, that's a group of people that loves to, whenever they lose, talk about who they were missing.
Yeah.
Tennessee had a lot of guys that are impact players, both on the offensive and defensive side in that game, and he just went out and won.
Yeah, maybe. But anyways, that brings us to question one of our 5 furious questions for week 8. Question 1 is, are Alabama fans the biggest crybabies in all of college football? And I bring this up because of the video and the other conspiracy theory that's going around, John. I don't know if you've seen this, of when one of the referees ruled a Tennessee touchdown, he does this afterwards, and Bama fans are taking that as, oh, no, he was in the bag rooting for the Vols on Saturday.
I think we got to take their internet access away for a week or something, because they've gone completely off the deep end with some of this stuff. It feels reminiscent of when Borat, in the second Borat, went to that guy's house in the cabin in the woods, and he logs onto to whichever website it was, and you're like, oh boy, I'm not sure that this person should be looking at the internet. That's kind of how I feel about some of these Alabama takes. So yes, they 100% are the biggest crybabies. I get it to an extent. You've been spoiled with just untold success for 15 years in a row. I get being shook anytime that you lose. But I mean, even the A&M loss last year didn't have the type of recourse from Bama fans that this one did. It feels like this one cut them particularly deep. And Bama loves to just point out that they own whoever. They own Georgia, and then they don't have that anymore. They own Tennessee, don't have that anymore either. So, tough times for them.
Yeah, but they do own Crybaby Twitter right now, so that's all that matters.
Killing it over there.
Anyways, question 2: rank your top teams in the country and stop when you get to Alabama.
So I will go Georgia, Tennessee, Ohio State, Alabama, and then Michigan and Clemson.
Do you still have them at number 4?
Alabama, yes.
Okay. So I think that they fell quite a bit. I mean, I think what are they ranked now? 6. So I'm going to go Ohio State, Georgia, Tennessee, Clemson, Michigan.
Your boys.
Yeah, Michigan. Anyways, so they haven't fallen too far in your mind, John, and they're still very much alive when it comes to the playoff conversation.
Yeah, it's there in front of them. I think that, oddly enough, that we haven't really seen this in the playoff era where the East might be stronger than the West, at least at the top. So I think that, Ole Miss is going to be that's a huge game for Alabama coming up later this season. But really, they're the only team in the West that I think is scary to Alabama. Whereas, the East it's got Tennessee, it's got Georgia. That's 2 top 4 teams right now, so top 3 teams. So that's tricky. But again, all of that sets up the point to where Alabama, I think, has a chance to win the SEC championship game by virtue of winning the West, being able to play in Atlanta in December. So, and you got to like them in that spot, whether you think this is as good of an Alabama team as we've seen in recent years or not. I still think that they will be tough to beat in Atlanta.
Very good. And that brings us into our next question. What's more likely, that 3 SEC teams get into the playoffs, or the Pac-12 and Big 12 combined for 1?
Shaping up for 3 SEC teams, potentially. We'll have to see what happens in the ACC if Clemson can run the table, or whoever comes out of the Michigan, Ohio State, and whether they still have enough cachet with the committee. But I think 3 SEC teams is more likely right now. I think the best chance for the Big 12 is Texas, and they have 2 losses. So, I mean, that you can do some rhetorical bending of things to really point out that Texas lost to Alabama. They lost Quinn Ewers in that game, and kind of brush off the rest. They still lost to Texas Tech, though. I mean, that might hold them back. I think that TCU is obviously their best hope at this point, but I feel like it's going to come home to roost at some point. I think that I still think that they end up losing 2 games when it's all said and done. And then the Pac-12, like we mentioned, has cannibalized itself. It's set up to cannibalize itself again with, basically its 2 best teams squaring off this weekend. So that's going to deliver at least one loss to its lone unbeaten team, or deliver a second loss to Oregon. So either way, that it's looking tougher and tougher for the Pac-12 to get a spot. So in this particular set of circumstances, 3 SEC.
Yeah, and that won't, and I'm sure Twitter will handle that very rationally if that is the case in December.
As
All
they
right.
always do.
Speaking of December, we are at the midway point right now, and in December we crown our Heisman Trophy winner. So, John, as of halfway through the college football season, who are your 5 finalists right now? Who's taking the trip to New York?
It's Hendon Hooker. It is C.J. Stroud, Blake Corum, probably Caleb Williams or Bryce Young is kind of a coin flip to me, and then Dorian Thompson-Robinson. He gets a chance to kind of cement himself in this race. I think of the long shots remaining on the board right now, I like him the best. Impressive stats every single week, some seriously marquee victories, potentially another one with them, Chip Kelly going back up to Oregon this weekend. I cannot wait for that game. And DTR, I mean, if he's been around for forever, same with Hendon Hooker. And it's been amazing to see him kind of like continue to improve and really sync up with this offense. So I think DTR is my 5th finalist right now.
Yeah, that Chip Kelly offense is looking like the Chip Kelly offense from Oregon back in the day. And we'll do a breakdown of that game coming up in just a bit. But question 5, John, how much worse does Scott Frost look after the details of his restructured contract came out this week?
So you're gonna have to catch me up on this one a little bit. What exactly went into those? I feel like I must have muted Nebraska Twitter or something.
So this came out Tuesday night, and I'll just read right here from the AP article. Fired Nebraska football coach Scott Frost would have received a 1-year contract extension and had his annual salary restored to $5 million if the Cornhuskers had shown improvement, gone 6-6 in the regular season, and made a bowl game. And that's according to their athletic director. They renegotiated his deal at the end of last season. He took a $1 million pay cut because of how bad he had been. But all he had to do was get to 6-6 and make it to a bowl game, and he would have gotten his full contract restored plus a year tacked on at the end.
Yeah, I mean, Scott Frost had everything. Nebraska wanted to make Scott Frost work so bad that, like you said, like they even lowered their own expectations to try to make this thing look less like of a disaster than what it ended up being. So, we didn't think it could look much worse, but boy, even when you get a true glimpse of what the internal expectations are, and they're not particularly high, and Nebraska still falls short, wild.
Yeah. Get that man to Tuscaloosa ASAP. He needs it more than anything. All right. Let's get into some of our breakdowns here. And let's start off with a big ACC matchup. It's a noon kickoff between Syracuse and Clemson in Death Valley. Clemson's favored by 13.5. The over-under for this one is 50 points. Is Syracuse a legit 6-0, or are they just more of a product of their weakish schedule this year?
I think that they are a good team. I think the schedule has been pretty favorable to them, and catching NC State sans Devin Leary this past weekend, I think it is proof of that. So they're solid. Their game against Purdue was an exciting one. They have some pieces there. I really like that Oronde Gadsden Jr. kid, but I think that that we see a bit of an exposing here in Death Valley. I don't think this sets up particularly well for the Qs, and I think that's kind of reflected in the spread as well.
Yeah, I'm feeling that way too. I'm thinking we're going to see a Clemson beatdown on Saturday. But anyways, let's talk about the 2 quarterbacks here. Garrett Schrader for Syracuse. He's been a very nice story this season. Kind of does a little bit of everything for the Orangemen. His more or less on Monkey Knife Fight, 225.5 passing yards. He's reached 226 in 4 of 6 games this season. But this is by far the best defense and the best defensive line that he's seen this season.
Yeah, I think that Syracuse kind of goes into a shell offensively here. I think that Clemson knows that if they take Gadsden away, that there's no passing threat, really. So I think they're going to go ahead and do that. And I don't think that any of these Syracuse guys can really step up to kind of replace that loss of production. So I'm going with last year. I think this is a tough spot for Schrader.
Yeah. And then on the other side, you got DJ Uyunglele, 220 and a half passing yards. He's reached 221 or more in 3 of 7 games. But Syracuse, surprisingly, does rank 12th in the nation when it comes to passing defense at 173 yards per game they're allowing. And DJU, he didn't look great in that victory over Florida State last week either.
Right. The line was really suspiciously low, and it trended down over the course of the week. I tried to decipher whether, Uyunglele had, some impressive home road splits. They've obviously been on the road the last 2 weeks at BC and at Florida State, but not really. I mean, his best game was at Wake Forest, and we started to kind of feel some positive vibes about him. But, a take on the Mark Twain quote, the rumors of my death have been greatly exaggerated. Maybe the rumors of DJU's resurgence have been greatly exaggerated. So I don't really trust him with that number against a good Syracuse
Hey, did
pass
he lose
defense.
some weight in the offseason? Because I feel like
I haven't heard.
Yeah,
He looks a little slimmer.
Does he look just a little slimmer? Is he running the ball a little better? I haven't heard. Nobody's mentioned that at all this year.
No,
right.
so I mean, we're breaking news here.
Yeah, exactly. All right, look at that. Anyways, moving on. We got 2 great running backs in this matchup, too. We got Sean Tucker, our guy, at 85 and a half rushing yards for Tucker. He's reached 86 or more in 4 of 6 games. Will he be pleased after this matchup?
I think he's going to get pushed for like 30 carries in this game. I think it's going to be an ugly per carry average, but I'm going more.
More? Just out of sheer, he has the ball that much?
Yeah, it's going to be one of those, like the box score. It's just the volume monster. It will be unleashed. I don't think that it's going to be like 150 yards or anything, but I think he pushes over that 85 and a half threshold.
All right, and then we got Will Shipley on the other side. His number is 80 and a half, more or less. He's reached 81 or more in 3 of 6 games. Hughes ranks 11th against the run, allowing just 95 yards per game, more or less.
I'm going to go with less here as well. I think that this ends up being a real kind of slugfest that is, decidedly in Clemson's favor. But, I don't think that Clemson necessarily moves the ball particularly easy here against Clemson. I think, or against Syracuse. I think that if they do, it's kind of by function of them wearing Syracuse down in the second half. So that's how Shipley gets there. But I don't think he's going to be like ripping off chunk yardage on this team.
All right, very good. So we go from what we're expecting to be kind of a slog to what could just be an absolute fun shootout out west in the Autzen Zoo. Number 9, UCLA at number 10, Oregon. It's a 3:30 kick. The Ducks are favored by 6 points. The over-under is 70 for this one. So the line makers are expecting a shootout as well. John, has Oregon done enough to climb back into the top 10, or do you think, or do we need to see more this weekend, or are they just a product of everybody else losing in front of them?
I think it's a little bit more of that. Like I think OK State's a better team than Oregon. I think USC is a better team than Oregon. I think even Utah is a better team than Oregon. So I mean that it's just their loss came in week 1 and it hung over them, but they've been able to kind of string together some wins to where you can believe in the Ducks a little bit here. But do I believe that they are the 10th best team in the country? I don't.
Yeah, neither do I. And I definitely need to see it this weekend, and we'll find out if we do. But let's start off with UCLA's quarterback, Dorian Thompson-Robinson. 270.5 passing yards is his more or less on MKF. He's reached 271 or more in 3 of 6 games. Oregon ranks 113th in the nation in passing defense at 275 yards per game. John, this is setting up nicely for a more. What do you think?
I definitely agree with you there. I think the more is the way to go with Thompson-Robinson, and it's not just the very excellent stat that Oregon's 113th in passing yardage average, but who's in the neighborhood? You got teams like Charlotte and Northern Illinois. Come on now, like that's not the company you want to be keeping. So yeah. I'm gonna go with the more here for DTR.
Yeah, not something you would expect out of a Dan Lanning coach team for sure. Anyways, moving on, our guy Bo Nix, we haven't talked about him in a while, but he's going to be in the national spotlight this week. 270 and a half passing yards, same number as DTR. For his more or less, Bo has reached 271 or more in 3 of 6 games. UCLA's pass defense, not much better than Oregon's. They rank 88th in the country, and they're allowing 245 yards per game, more or less for Bo.
I'm going to go with less. I know he had that crazy game against Wazoo a little while back, and he's been really efficient for the most part this year. But I got to go with less here. I think that we see him turn in a solid game. Maybe he runs a little bit more. He's been really crushing it as far as finding the end zone on the ground. But I think that we see more rushing attempts this week out of Nick. So I'm going to
Yeah,
go with
and his
less.
fantasy prop on MKF is 27.5.
Ooh, that's high. I might go more though. I mean, the threat of him running for 2 touchdowns gets you basically halfway there. I'm going to go with more.
Yeah, what last week, or 2 weeks ago rather, like at Arizona, 8 carries, 70 yards, and 3 touchdowns. That's what, 25 points on its own right there. So he just
Bing
has to
bong.
yeah. There you go. All right, Bo Nix, big game coming up on Saturday. Who wins this one, John?
Give me the Bruins. I think that we see Chip Kelly, get his revenge on his former program, the program that he built basically. So at least in modern times. So give me the Bruins, man.
I like
There's something going on there.
I like that as well. I'm taking the Bruins this weekend too. All right, let's get to our speed round. We'll start off in the SEC. Jackson Dart at LSU. Ole Miss is at LSU this weekend. 230.5 passing yards, more or less.
I'm gonna go with less. I don't know why or how exactly this has happened, but Ole Miss basically is like the best rushing attack in college football. You don't really expect that from Lane Kiffin, especially when you land a hotshot quarterback recruit like Jackson Dart in the transfer portal. But if it's working on the ground with Evans and Judkins, they just don't need Dart to throw that much. And we saw that last week. I think we see something very similar here, especially with them going to LSU. You're going to want to kind of limit Dart, like the amount to which they need to lean on Dart in the pass game and going less.
Jaden Daniels on the other side, 240.5 passing yards, more or less.
I'm going to go with less. Last week was more about Florida than Daniels, in my opinion.
All right. How about Kayshon Boutte versus Ole Miss? 55.5 receiving yards.
Less Butte, less.
No booty call this weekend. All right. Jahmyr Gibbs, Alabama's running back versus Mississippi State. You're going to think the Tide are going to try to get things rolling again. 94.5 rushing yards for Gibbs, more or less.
I'm going to go with less. They mix in McClellan. Gibbs, a lot of his damage comes through the passing game. He runs really well. I mean, the per carry average is phenomenal. Gibbs is an amazing player. But Miss State, a little salty against the run. I'm going to say less here for Gibbs.
How about Mississippi State's quarterback, Will Rogers, 325.5 passing yards?
I'm going with more. Will Rogers just throws the ball so dang much. It's and we saw last week. I mean, I think Miss State has less talented receivers in Tennessee, but Will Rogers is going to be testing that secondary early and often on Saturday.
More than 50 attempts?
Yes, yeah, I'm thinking that this one against Alabama, where Bama might push out to a pretty decent lead here. I think we're going to see Rogers have kind of like ridiculous looking box score by the end of Saturday.
All right. How about Bryce Young, 325.5 passing yards?
I'm going less. I think that this Miss State defense is at least solid. I understand like the PO'd Bama narrative coming into this one, but I think that this one ends up a little bit less for Young. 325 is high for me.
And finally, Max Duggan versus Kansas State, 270.5 passing yards, more or less, for the TCU quarterback.
I'm going less. K-State tough, and then also on the other side, they really slow down the game as far as like the plays per game go. The clock's running when you got Deuce Vaughn and Adrian Martinez taking up all those rushes. I don't think that Dugan gets the volume necessary to hit that 270.5 number.
All right, very good. That's going to do it for our speed round. I do want to touch on a couple other things before we wrap up the show. That Ole Miss LSU game, if we can go back to that for a second. Did you see this game opened up? Ole Miss was favored by 1.5, but this has swung to LSU -2. And I'm just wondering why that is, because I feel like we're in for Ole Miss just running the ball down LSU's throats on Saturday.
Yeah, that LSU has been part of some really interesting lines, I feel like, over the course of this year. And Ole Miss has too, to a certain extent. Their game against Kentucky definitely stands out to me. But yeah, it's fascinating that I guess it's a bet that LSU can stop Ole Miss's run game and make Dart throw. And when you have the raucous environment of the real Death Valley, it's not 11 a.m. local. It's an afternoon kickoff. I think there's a lot of heavy lifting being done by some intangibles a little bit here. I think Ole Miss is the better team. I think that they do go in there and get the win.
Yeah, it's like, have people's memories, have they completely forgot what happened a couple of weeks ago in that Tennessee game? It was a very similar situation with the spread that LSU was favored going into that. And then Tennessee just did whatever they wanted. And I feel like people are taking the cheese with wanting LSU to be good. I feel like they're just kind of taking that cheese so much. And I really, last week, just as you mentioned, was much more about Florida just not being good on defense.
Yeah, they had the one player on his Instagram after the team saying words about the team that I can't repeat on this family-friendly program. Florida's a mess. Awesome.
Yeah, great, good. I know you're looking forward to that one next week. We'll talk about that next week with Florida, Georgia, and then I do want to end with just. Michigan is a good team. All right.
There you go. There it is.
They're a good team. I don't think they're great by any means. I think they have a great offensive line. Would they run for 375? John, I think you and I could have hit the century mark running the ball against Penn State last weekend. Some balls. I mean, it's like every time I looked up, Blake Corum was running into the end zone.
and when he wasn't, it was Donovan Edwards. Like it was an absolute run blocking clinic, and those running backs are both, extremely talented. Michigan's been able to recruit that position very well in recent years. So, I mean, that's just gonna. Their identity is basically the same as last year. So I foresee their fate being roughly similar. If they make the playoff, if they beat Ohio State, I don't think that they're making it to the championship game, but they're going to be in it until at least the last weekend of the regular season.
Yeah, and then I think it's all the wheels are going to fall off. Brian, you can mark the tape right here. Ohio State is going to beat them by 3 touchdowns, at least. Ohio State is going to absolutely bludgeon Michigan the Saturday after Thanksgiving. You can mark that down. All right. Anyways, John, anything else?
Let's see. I know the Big 12 constantly underserved by everyone, us included. Sometimes we did touch on the K-State TCU game, but Texas OK State I think is going to be a lot of fun. Texas 6.5-point favorites on the road here. I don't know. Maybe the Pokes bounce back. We'll see. I'm really, really, really interested to see how that one goes. The 3:30 window on Saturday Eastern time is preposterous. You got Ole Miss-LSU, you got Oregon, UCLA, and you got Texas OK State. I'm running out of screens.
Yeah. Last Saturday, like I almost didn't break everything down from the multi TVs I had going on in the living room because of this weekend. But actually, no. Once I flipped on the Notre Dame game, that was when I unplugged it. It just made me so upset that they lost to Stanford. That was their only Power 5 win is over Notre Dame. There was one team in the country that had not won. That was a Power 5 team that had not beaten an FBS school going into last week. It was Stanford, and of course, they beat the Irish on Saturday night. So
the Freeman era, can we do a little temperature check there?
It's not great. I feel like he's a coach that will get them fired up for the big games, but they're going to overlook every kind of mediocre opponent, which is what we've seen so far. So I don't know. Maybe bring in Urban. Bring him in. Bring him in.
That was quick.
Yeah. All right. Anyways, that's going to do it for us. Enjoy your college football Saturday. Don't forget to subscribe on our YouTube page at Monkey Knife Fight. And good luck in your contest this weekend.